I describe the business as part art, part science, and that's a really good example of it. That was probably one of the biggest waste of time in sort of founding the business, I'd say. Our editorial content is proudly free of commercial influence.
Dan, what's your biggest business problem right now?
Oh gosh, where to start?
This is the Leeds Business Podcast, and I'm your host, Phil Fraser. This week, we speak to Dan Murray, co-founder and CEO of U Platforms. Dan tells us about the step from freelancer to business owner with just a back-of-a-fag packet business plan, how not being the same as other media owners causes problems. He tells us about his incoming growth pains and the benefits of the Chamber of Commerce and LeedsBID. The business surgery answers the question, I need to up my business sales. How do I even start putting a marketing plan together? Before we start, I have one simple request. Please hit the follow or subscribe button on the app that you're listening on. That's it. Thank you. Okay, so let's get into what is a really wide-ranging episode. On today's Leeds Business Podcast, I have with me Dan Murray, CEO of U Platforms. Hi, Dan.
Hi, Phil. How are we doing?
I'm good. Now, before we start, have you taken private equity for the business?
No, we're entirely bootstrapped so far.
Right. Okay. The reason I ask, we'll ask about the bootstrapping in a minute, but the reason I ask is today's podcast is brought to you in association with Leeds-based YFM Equity Partners. YFM Equity Partners offer investments from £2 to £15 million, specifically to fast-growing businesses, as well as providing the resources and expertise needed to take your business to the next level. So if you're an entrepreneur with a vision for growth, whether you're expanding your market or scaling operations, YFM Equity Partners can help you turn your ambitions for your business into reality. And if you want to hear real life stories about YFM, listen to our recent episode with Adam Oldfield of Force 24 or episode 23 with Zandra Moore from Pan Intelligence. Both of them have taken equity from YFM, and both of them talk very positively about them. So give those two episodes a listen. So if you're looking for partners to team up with, that believes in your potential, you can find out more at yfmep.com. The address is also in the show notes below. And when you do contact YFM, make sure you tell them that Phil from Leeds Business Podcast sent you, because it helps keeps the show going. So, Dan, let's go back a few years to when you were freelancing and decided to launch a business. How did that come about?
I guess there was I guess it was a good time, as good a time as any. I kind of had a really good career freelancing as a techie. I'd studied internet and business at Hull University, and came out of uni, did the travel thing for a while, and then decided that I got quite a few 9-to-5s out of the industry by that point, and decided that freelancing was my go-to to keep me sharp, keep me interested, sort of taking 3, 6, 12-month stints at a bunch of new media agencies and various other some of the bigger, more corporate places. And, that was great. And I got some really good experience, not just developing software, but creating solutions, actually running as one agency's head of digital for a while, Scrum mastering, all that kind of thing. And I decided that I kind of had a lot of exposure to the media industry. It's something I've always been passionate about. I think that I saw that digital media obviously came about in a bit of a higgledy-piggledy way. And by that, I mean, you had a lot of legacy media, so the newspapers, magazines that, I don't know if you remember this, Phil, the kind of race to go online. Everyone had to have a website. Everyone had to have one. You had to sling all your content on there. And it was almost a bit of an afterthought, was the monetization. And, that era of slapping banner ads everywhere and pop-ups and self-replicating pop-ups and all the really annoying stuff was kind of just banged on. I get the Saturday Times, and you still open that, you still have a lovely double-page spread in the Saturday Times magazine, and that's kind of where the sort of, the really nice advertising happens, whereas online it was all a bit down and dirty. I think there was an interesting quote, I think, in The Atlantic. Banner advertising is cheap and it looks it. And I think that kind of really sums it up for me. And I decided that well, it's not just Leeds and it's not just regional media, to be clear when I say this. Regional media publications tend to be the worst at those sort of tactics. And there's no offence off any of our friends elsewhere in the industry, because there's some really good players around Yorkshire. And we kind of said, actually, all this knowledge of how an agency would get in front of a new audience, would get new customers, and then you've got the media world where you're just sticking ads out on advertorial. Why aren't you using those same techniques in the media space? Some really clever, so thinking about your conversion funnel, thinking about the psychology of the customer before, you're kind of just trying to ram something down the throat. You kind of have to think about people that are in a buying mindset, not just we'll just try and sell to everyone. You can be my view was you can be a lot smarter about it. And that's kind of what we set out to do. We kind of set up the business and said, right, okay, we're not just going to be another guide. We're not just going to be another publication or a blog or whatever, or just another one of these carbon copy outlets. We're going to actually we'll actually generate an audience. We're going to curate an audience that actually want to do stuff. Obviously in Leeds, it was called Leeds List. It's called Leeds List. And think about what those people want to achieve. And I was lucky that I have my technology, my expertise is business and tech, not the creative side. I've luckily got a really talented co-founder who looks after the words and the bit that people actually read and value. I just look after the business. And we kind of came together and said, right, okay, our content strategy will essentially get that audience and give them content they want to read. And maybe it's my inner tight Yorkshireman that said this, but actually, if we're creating a studio team of X number of heads, if they're not reading that content, why are we bothering? And again, it's a really funny one. As I just sort of did research, and I had friends who worked in other publications, the time on pages were really poor. That dwell time, we actually come on, read something, and then do it or don't, or click off, whatever. They're really, really low. Like they were sub 30% when we first started the business. And that's only got worse amongst the industry. And you can see why. You try and click on an article these days, and you get a pop-up, you get a video, you get something completely irrelevant to what you're trying to read. And even when you do battle past that and you finally get to the content, it's like, okay, this actually wasn't what there's no story there anyway. It's just a bit of clickbait, and you disappear. You can't swipe left fast enough to get off it. And you kind of say, actually, let's change the paradigm. Let's not care about just getting engagement at all costs or traffic at all costs. Let's change the paradigm that we'd rather have a better audience who actually read our content than just all and sundry that don't care or aren't engaged. So that was how the foundership story happened, essentially.
Okay. I mean, we are 7-8 years down the line, and there is a certain major local media owner whose website still, in fact, is getting worse. And it is shocking. I mean, I have to hold my hand up. In my previous life, we were banner ads and pop-ups and CPMs and all that sort of stuff. But that was quite a few years ago. So it's simple. It might be a simple question. It might not be a simple question. Did you set up as an agency, or did you set up as a media owner?
I guess it's not a stupid question at all, because that's always been a challenge in terms of communicating what we do, because that's what we are. We're essentially both. We essentially set up as a performance agency that owns its own channels, and that's kind of the kind of thing that makes us different and unique.
So you're an agency with your own media vehicles.
Yeah, exactly.
Now, you've used the term or the company name U-Platform. Most people will know you as Leeds List.
That's right.
I want to go forwards and backwards. What was the thinking behind sort of structuring the content as lists?
So the name Leeds List was, it was slightly, we were trying to come up with a name. We have found something lovely and alliterative, and we checked that the IP was there, the trademark was available, and that's why we came up with Leeds List. It was quite a nice coincidence, if I'm honest, that in terms of contemporary media consumption habits, the listicle format was really coming of age. The kind of the BuzzFeeds and stuff kind of started the viral listicle format, easy to consume, quick fire content. But again, like anything, I remember they kind of slimmed down their news desk's manpower. at some point sort of in the late noughties, and decided that they were just going to recycle a lot of social content. It meant that the content, again, wasn't really highly valued, whereas actually the list format content is something that people enjoy to consume.
So it was just a response to media consumption and sort of trends in the industry to go list rather than maybe long form copy or something like that.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's not to say there are times when a long form piece is more appropriate than a listicle. But yeah, we kind of saw that the way that media consumption was going, into that sort of contemporary format. We saw that there was probably more that could be done with it, both in terms of reader value and in the commercials. And we kind of took that forward. And there's loads of. I describe the business as part art, part science, and that's a really good example of it. And that the content I've got behind this wall here is a fantastic studio team who are all trained as response copywriters rather than journalists. And again, no offense to our friends that said large media outlets. And they kind of craft the content that people want to read based on all of the data and insights they have access to. But those listicle formats, for example, are tweaked to be the perfect length in terms of the amount of what device you're using. So they're all uniform. So there's uniform lengths of paragraphs. There's images that are perfect, that kind of keep you moving through, that encourage you that kind of reward your curiosity. Our job as a media owner is to reward our readers and reward our audience by giving us a chance, by giving us the click. I think that's the thing that a lot of people forget in this day and age. It's not like sitting at the dentist and paging through Yorkshire Life or whatever, and stumbling across an advert or a piece of advertorial. You have to win the click, and if you don't reward your readers, your audience will leave you, and your audience will not buy from your advertisers.
Okay, I want to go back a stage. So, in terms of the launch of the business, talk us through that. Was there a business plan? Was there a sort of was it just a core of an idea? I mean, how it's yourself and is it Ali's the other partner?
Ali, yeah, that's right, my co-founder.
So talk us through sort of like day one or pre-day one.
Oh gosh, I mean, day one and into the first months, the business plan was sort of back of an envelope sort of material. It was a genesis of an idea, how we kind of took that forward and how we created that. Took a few missteps, and I'm being quite polite here. I managed to convince Ali to bring her expertise to the table a couple of months down the line, because again, as I say, identify my own weakness. It's not my expertise, and I think that was you've got the principles of SEO in terms of making sure you've got good stuff that actually people will find when they're searching for stuff to do. You've got the sort of market need in terms of that locality, and yeah, it was really interesting those first few months. It was very spit and sawdust, running network cables across. Our first office was above OK Karaoke, if you remember that. And yeah, it was very village, let's say.
Okay. You mentioned some missteps. Give us some examples.
I think to reflect on it, there's always the concerns, and there's always the need to drive revenue, even from a very, very early stage in a business. And I think that we potentially drifted away from the core belief and core vision and values of the business. And again, reflecting on that, I think that's something I learn quickly, but it never hurts to get a reminder of, to kind of keep your vision and values front and center, and that goes and that has to go through every part of business. We didn't sort of the kind of initial missteps that we didn't stick to that. We kind of did things for revenue that didn't align with my vision, and that was probably one of the biggest wastes of time in sort of founding the business, I'd say.
What was the point where you thought, actually, we've got something here? This is a goer.
I think deciding almost clearing the decks, deciding, right, if we can't make this work properly, if we can't make this work with the vision, then I'm not interested in just doing it like everyone else. I think, and we I took it to market. I took it to market personally because I'm not training sales, but I can talk rubbish to people fairly proficiently, and I kind of approached brands that I thought it would work for, and had some really great conversations. And I described it as I've described it to you. You know, this is our vision. This is what we want to do. And it was really nice that people lent into those conversations. You literally kind of saw people get up and say, "Oh yeah, I do." You know, these are people working for big national brands, and they were saying, "You know, I do. You know, I spend a couple of million quid with ad agency X, and I don't ever see any of it, or I spend thousands of pounds with one of the big media owners, and I've not seen a campaign report yet." You know, and you kind of understood that. And again, the conversations we had with some of our early commercial partners were really cool. It was really cool because they saw the potential in the product, and they were a big part. You know, someone described it as you're essentially doing live R&D. You know, as we sort of heard client issues and objectives, and I remember sitting with one particular client on the roof of the Belgrave, sort of sketching out what this could look like, and he kind of fed in from his brand what they'd want and how it'd work, and we kind of thought about how joining the dots with the tech in terms of creating a really great customer journey without leaving our platform. And that was really cool. And we kind of realized when it wasn't just shifting ad space like everyone else, I kind of realized that this can be pretty cool. This can be really interesting.
So what is the difference between just shifting ad space that you offer?
So I always describe marketing, advertising as a means to an end. I think people kind of forget the objective is businesses want to sell something. They want to sell something. They want to grow the customer base. They don't want to buy a quarter page. They don't want to buy 100,000 banner ads. They don't want to buy a piece of advertorial. They don't want to buy a billboard. They want new customers. There's lots of other. I'm simplifying massively because there are obviously loads of intermediate marketing goals and objectives in between those 2 points. But ultimately, that's the long and short of it. And you have to think about actually, if I stick my message in front of potential customers 100,000 times in a banner ad, how likely is it that they're actually going to see it? I'm going to take them from brand awareness through to consideration, preference and conversion in that few seconds to see a banner ad. Probably really unlikely. Same with a social ad these days. As a sort of more modern equivalent. I don't know if you're in the same boat, Phil, but you kind of when you end up doom scrolling through Instagram or whatever, you kind of lose out. You seem to lose hours, but you kind of see it interspersed with paid messages, and you'll see a brand and like, oh, that's kind of cool, but then you just keep scrolling. Current research says that the dwell time on those social posts is well under 5 seconds on average. And again, thinking about that, is that enough to say, actually, I'm going to buy that product? Yes, I want it. When's the last time you made a purchase decision in 5 seconds or under? So what we do is actually think, all right, you want to sell widgets. So right, who tends to buy them? What are they looking for when they buy them? How do we reach those customers when they're either searching or at the points of their decision making process? And then how many touch points is it going to take to convert them? Obviously, it depends on the price of the products and whether you need to get permission from your wife or your partner or whatever first, which is often my thing when I make ridiculous online purchases. And you think about what are all those touch points? How do we create awareness? How do we get consideration? How do you make you want it? How do you think that product is something I want now? And then making it really damned easy where you've got that excitement and appetite for them to buy from you. And that's kind of it's bringing together all of those methods which traditionally you go to a big agency for to get your website, landing page, ad space, social ads. We kind of meld all those things together in one, because we understand that particularly winning customers in 2024 is far more than just shoving a message in their faces. It's far more nuanced. It's far more interesting. You have to respect that we've got far more as consumers. We've got far more choice than we ever had. And it's so bloody easy to lose a potential customer if you frustrate them or if you give them something that's not quite right for them. They can close the tab. They can put the phone down, and you've lost them forever. Whereas actually, if you think about we want to create new customers, we want to create proper interest, proper loyalty, even which is unheard of in the digital age. We kind of have to reward their curiosity and get them through to that conversion point by creating intrigue, creating interest, and that's our approach really.
Okay. And would you do that for client only through Leeds List, or would you do that as any other agency would do using other media?
We've only ever done it through Leeds Lists. There was a time during COVID where we did some syndicated work because COVID, and we had to make money. We had to make money through whatever means. But yeah, we've only done it on our own platform so far, and that's kind of worked really well for us, because I think one thing that's really important to what we do is knowing the audience from the beginning, from the very genesis of an idea, being able to shape the idea around them, and then being able to evaluate it and sort of optimize it as we go on. And that's the only thing you can do by owning your own channels. If you went to a third party media owner, you wouldn't have those insights, and you wouldn't have those. You wouldn't be able to sort of make those in-campaign optimizations.
Okay, so is the I mean, my background's selling ad space, so I understand this market. So is your content just paid for content? Is it affiliate? Is it crafted for content that they can then advertise at the back of? How explain how all that works?
Sure. So our platforms are a mix of editorial and paid content. And again, I keep banging on about this, but I really believe it. We have to give our audience value, and if it was just paid content, it'd be really bloody disingenuous. So our editorial content is proudly free of commercial influence. There are 2 ad spots on our editorial and around our editorial content, in case somebody does want to buy banner ads, which is rare these days, because you'll see most pages don't have any ad placement on at all. And around that, we have paid content. So there is a formula that I can't share with you, but there's in terms of the sort of ratio of paid content versus editorial, because again, making a high quality reader experience, and again, making sure that we stick to the audience profiles that we know enjoy our content, and that we want to win, and the audience we want to own.
Okay. I want to move sort of across a little bit now. You're involved in LeedsBID, and you're involved with the Chamber of Commerce. Talk me through those 2 things, and why you got involved with them, and what benefit you see from them.
Oh, interesting. So I'll start with the Chamber of Commerce. I find it really intriguing. I was much younger when I first got involved with the Chamber of Commerce, and I was, at that time anyway, one of the youngest in the room, which was a lovely feeling. I've not had that in a very long time. And I think it was more giving me experience of what it was like to occupy board seats in a bigger, more mature organisation. That was really valuable. It was always there was lots of value in getting involved in civic projects, and I say that with a slight reservation. I think it's always important to remember where your civic interest starts and ends, and where your commercial interest starts and ends. I think if you try and blur them, end up trying to blur them, again, you can end up appearing really disingenuous. I'm doing this with my civic interest, and actually it's just a revenue generation opportunity. The optics of that aren't particularly great. So I try to create real delineation. For example, we did some work with one of our sort of public sector friends that I met through the chamber, and I sort of recused myself from that conversation and passed it on to someone in my commercial team because of that very reason. But with the Chamber of Commerce, I think that West Yorkshire has loads of potential. I think that we do a terrible job of telling people how great we are outside of this county, and it's a great route to market for that. In terms of getting business, championing the locality, and there are some. I think there's also the other value is meeting other business owners. You'll probably know this, Phil. Running a business, being at the top makes you sound very important, but it can be quite a lonely place. But when you're sharing your pains with other people in the same boat, it's just really nice. It's really nice to hear people in the same boat. It's really nice to kind of share those war stories and offer advice and take advice. The business improvement district kind of came off the bat. The business improvement district was originally, the inception of that came from the chamber. And I was lucky enough to know fantastic chap called Keith Ramsey, who you probably know. He was part of the interview process for the original groups, the steering groups, and so on. And I said, look, I feel that a business improvement district, having done the research, can do a lot of what the local authorities and the tourist boards at that time and the destination management organisations can't do. It's a fairly straight up objective. Andrew Cooper, chief exec of the BID, says it perfectly. It's not about him. It's not about his bid. It's about the 5 letters of Leeds. And how you activate that, how you bring that to market. Again, is kind of it's a blank canvas. They're not restricted by things like, and obviously they have their own governance rules, but they don't have the same restrictions of a public sector organisation, for example. So they can do really ambitious, adventurous stuff, and I find that really, really exciting. And you've just got to look at the scale of the stuff the BID does over Christmas. The massive projections on the front of the Queens. You've had Monopoly over the summer, and I can't tell you, every time I've got the train to work, there's been excited little kids with still clinging onto their Monopoly maps, having ticked them all off around town, and that's really, really cool. I think we're not just driving footfall into the city centre, but we're giving kids from all around the metropolitan area, from all around the county, I suspect, something great to do, something that's shown in the city centres for them. Getting them involved. It's not just retail, it's not just hospitality. It's actually real activation of our public realm, and that's really, really nice.
Yeah, I mean, the Monopoly thing I thought was brilliant, and the giant was the dinosaurs last year, or was it the year before?
Yeah. Absolutely, yeah. There's a dinosaur. I think it was the year before. The dinosaurs again. Again, the scale of that was I can't, having grown up in Leeds, I can't remember anything of that kind of scale before. It's really, truly impressive. There's a bloody massive dinosaur coming out of Granary Wharf.
Fantastic. Right, before we carry on, I want to talk to our viewers and listeners about the Leeds Business Podcast Fair Deal. The Leeds Business Podcast Fair Deal has 2 sides to it. My side of the deal is each week, free of charge, I bring you exciting, motivating and inspirational business leaders like Dan, totally for free. Your side of the deal has 2 parts to it. Part number 1, recommend this podcast to one other person you feel will get benefit from it. And part number 2, write us a review at the Apple Podcasts app or on podchaser.com. So that's the Leeds Business Podcast Fair Deal. I've done my side of the deal. Viewers and listeners, you have to do your side now. So, Dan, fair deal?
Sounds reasonable.
Only reasonable. Okay, let's go. Just reasonable. That's it. Just reasonable.
Typical the auctionman, right?
Yeah. I'm not going to get overexcited about it. It's just reasonable. It's a reasonable deal. Just going back to Leeds List and new platforms. We've talked about the start of the journey. Let's get up to date. What have been the growing pains of the business?
I think we learned fairly early on that having a disruptive product makes it a tough sell, and it's still a tough sell today. There are still an awful lot of buyers that expect the kind of mediocrity of just doing a standard ad buy and just buying some space, and that's kind of, and I say this with being completely open. I get it. I get why people sort of are reluctant to spend, because there's an awful lot of snake oil in the market. And no offense to your previous career, I'm sure you were a stand-up media guy. But there are a lot of people out there that aren't, that kind of make these hugely overblown promises, whether it's the size of their audience, whether it's the kind of results they get. And I feel that that's a huge challenge. We kind of people see what we do, and there's a time when I remember sitting across the table, and the chap we were meeting with worked for a developer, and he just stopped, paused for a minute. He'd written down the stats, the kind of stats we told him, and said, "Bullshit! No, show me. Don't believe it." And it was quite nice that it was that open. He didn't just say, and never spoke to us again. And we did, he kind of said, right, okay, we NDA'd him, we logged him in via our VPN, and we showed him some live numbers. And, it was cool that he said, well, to be fair, if it had been half of that, I'd have been impressed. So that's all right. we did we did that bit of business. But I think the kind of growing pains are that there's an awful lot of the same in the market, in media particularly. There's a lot of people doing the same, and that's fine. There's loads to do in this town. There's loads to do in there's loads of stories out there. There's loads of things to talk about. What's kind of frustrating, I guess, from my side is doing it right, doing it well. There's not a lot of ambition to kind of do it properly. There are a lot of other media owners that kind of charge quite a bit cheaper than that are quite a bit cheaper than us, but there's no kind of almost responsibility for success. There's almost no accountability there, and that's kind of we are hugely transparent. We are hugely accountable to our commercial partners. We're accountable to our audience too by not doing something that is deceptive or misleading or just plain stupid. And I think for me that's probably one of the things that we continue to see. I think it's obviously, you'll know this, it's an ASA requirement that you mark up anything that's been paid for as advertising partnership or whatever. And it's remarkable the amount of paid content that you see from other digital media owners that isn't. And I think consumers are smart. They know that an incredibly gushing review or whatever is obviously paid for, and I think it's a real. I think it's foolhardy, not just because of the ASA rules, but I think your audience see it, they know it's paid for, they know that you're just choosing not to disclose it, and that your brand suffers.
Yeah. I was fortunate enough to exit my business just before the ASA rules came in about that sort of stuff. So our affiliate content, wasn't highlighted to be that sort of stuff.
Brilliant.
This sort of segues in quite nicely to this week's business surgery. Those of you who've been listening or watching for a while will know each week we have a business problem mailed into us from a business owner, and myself and the guest will have a go at giving a solution. This week's problem came from Ron Skolnick, and Ron says, I need to up my business sales. How do I even start putting a marketing plan together? So it's quite a broad question. But I always start with a very simple thought process, which is who you're trying to target, what you're trying to tell them, and what do you want them to do.
Yeah.
And within that, who are you trying to target? The next question is then, where do they hang out? And I think far too many people, and Dan, you'll have probably got this. You'll have people who come to you and say, I want to appear on TikTok because everybody says we've got to be on TikTok. And that's, absolutely. I always think that's looking at that's looking down the telescope the wrong way.
Yeah.
If you're selling, I don't know, Acorn stair lifts, you do not want to be on TikTok because people who are buying Acorn stair lifts are not on TikTok. So it's about who are the audience, what you're trying to get them to do, where do they hang out, and how is it best to target them?
Absolutely.
What would you add to that, Dan, to Ron's question?
I start with any challenge like this by getting a piece of paper or getting a whiteboard and drawing an upside down triangle on it and thinking, right, okay, put yourself in the customer's shoes. And you probably don't have one just one customer persona. Start with one, and then the others will fall down nicely behind it. And thinking about how do you take those people from that point of not even knowing about you through to parting with the hard-earned money. And thinking about all those stages in the thought process. And it's exactly what you said, Phil. Thinking about where do you hang out, where do you find those people first of all? Because without that, you've lost the game before you even started. But then, how do you take them through? How do you take them on that journey with your brand? How do you inspire them to keep going? And if you go to Amazon to buy some toothpaste or some pens or something, you kind of think about it very simplistically. You kind of start looking for pens, search, page through the hundreds of options, pick some. You kind of, whatever the copy on the page either convinces you on price or on suitability for your needs, and then you go through the purchase, the checkout funnel. But you kind of think about it's a lot more nuanced. If I'm in the market. If I was in the market for pens, that was a good analogy. But if I'm not even aware of your stair list or whatever, you kind of have to win my attention first. And it's, as you said, making sure you're in the right place. And then once you won my attention, actually giving me reasons to buy, actually giving me reasons to like you as a brand, actually giving me compelling things to keep me engaged.
Yeah, yeah. And I think the other thing to add, I mean, obviously we, with my background and with your background, we're talking specifically about, or we're focusing on media. Marketing covers so many different things that it could be direct mail, it could be point of sale, it could be sales promotion, it could be PR, it could be brochures, it could be print, it could be outdoor, it could be TV, it could be anything. And I think with a marketing plan, too many people start at the wrong end, and I think that's the key. So, Ron, I hope that's probably thrown 100 questions at you now, and you're now sitting there wondering what the hell I'm going to do. But it gives you a start point. So, if anybody else has got a business problem they'd like solving by myself or a future guest, drop me an email at phil@leedsbusinesspodcast.com, and we'll have a go at solving your business problem. So, question. Okay, let's flip that round then. Dan, what's your biggest business problem right now?
Oh gosh, where to start? Where to start? I think so. We're in a journey. We're on a journey of scale as a business. So we've won an audience that as we outgrew the Leeds List name probably a few years ago now. Probably I'm gonna say probably over half now of our audience. And then when I talk about audience, I talk about people who come to our websites, people who engage, who are followers on social, people who are our subscribers. We kind of have an audience, probably over half our audience now, that are from all around Yorkshire. They're not from Leeds. They don't have a Leeds postcode. They're not from the old Leeds region boundaries, for example. And we kind of outgrew that, and we kind of do our developing our Yorkshire brand, which is exciting. And so there's kind of the problems of scale. Is logistically, you'll know well that Yorkshire's a bloody massive place, which is presenting issues of its own operationally. There's obviously the need to stay authentic. So I'm not going to have my Leeds team tell you about all the great things to do in Hull or York. We're going to create teams that can do that with authenticity and with that expertise. And then I think that it's ironic, really, but I make the analogy of it's like the mechanic's car. It's the one that always gets serviced last. I think the biggest challenge, as I've described our product in quite a lot of detail, it's quite nuanced, and I think we don't do a good enough job of. The biggest challenge for us is marketing our products, our own products, and marketing ourselves.
Okay, yeah, and classic growth and scaling issues. How do we've got to base camp? How do we get to the next level? And it throws up different problems, different issues, and to a degree with a lot of businesses, new skill sets as well. I'm assuming your Leeds team is based in Leeds, but your Hull team or your Sheffield team are not going to be based in Leeds. So you've then got, you talked about geography already. There are lots and lots of things that come with scale. Okay, now every week. Oh, sorry, go on.
I would say that I think one of the things that I've learned as a scaling challenge, which I think underpins it all, is culture. Making sure that your company culture transcends the remoteness or the geographical distance. And I think that's probably for me we're a team that likes to push the boundaries and deliver high quality stuff. I think making sure that culture is something you can replicate across regions is really important to us.
Yeah. Very good. That's a good point. Now, every week we ask our guests to give us a how-to. So, Dan, tell us what you're going to teach us how to do, and then teach us how to do it.
Oh, okay. I've been thinking about a few of these, and I think I'm going to play to my strengths because it's all I talk about. So I'm going to talk about work, of course, and how to actually know whether, if you do a media buy, how to know whether you're actually getting what you're paying for. I think that there's I think for me, I think business would be better for us all, whether you're a business owner in media or out, if you knew you actually said, right, okay, I'm a SME, I want to get X number of 1,000 new customers. How am I going to make sure? How do I keep accountability for what I'm going? How is the media owner accountable for what I'm buying from them, and it's by asking the right questions. It's about making sure that, I think as well as a media owner, it's like you said earlier. Like we get people come to us. I want to buy a TikTok campaign. I want to buy an Instagram social campaign, and without being flippant, we kind of turn on to, that's great. We could do that for you, but what do you actually want? What do you actually want? You want to sell stair lifts? Oh, actually, you don't want to be. You don't want to be on TikTok. You want to be, and actually thinking about, it should be how to do that is start with your objective. How to actually grow your business, how to actually get the most from your media is actually to start with your objective, not the end. And if you're talking to someone who can give you the value you need, they'll give you the options and they'll back it up with case studies. They'll back it up with actual data. They'll not say we've got 65 bazillion people and we'll all look at your ad and everything will be great, because that's clearly not true. But ask the questions. How to get the most from a media buy from advertising spend is to ask what it will actually achieve, and hold the media owner accountable. You said you'll get me 3,000 new customer acquisitions. Okay, great. Put it in the contract. If we're all confident, test it. Ask other questions. If you're handling customer data, you have to be more careful than ever. Not just because you'll get done by the Information Commissioner's Office, but make sure you're handling customer data properly, making sure your media owner knows how to do that properly too. Because ultimately, customers are fine being sold to as long as you're upfront, you're transparent. I love getting an offer. I'm shopping for sunglasses at the minute because I'm going on holiday next month. It's like, oh yeah, found these. I'll tell you what, I will enter a competition. Or I will sign up to that because I might get a voucher afterwards. And you know what? If they respect my data, if they're clear about how it's been used and what I'll receive, that's fine. If there's a well-known holiday brand that seems to bother me twice a day now, and they got very quickly shoved in my spam folder because they were deceptive. I signed up for an account with them, and there was I don't remember at all saying I'd agreed to the volume or type of emails that I've received since, or the messages or the push notifications. So Jesus Christ, looking at my phone every time it pings. It's I think ask your media owners how you're going to actually use my data, how you're going to respect the customers that you're going to win for me. So yeah, that's kind of my expertise and what I'd probably advise any business owner, any SME.
Okay, it's great advice. That, I mean, it's as I've mentioned a couple of times, I've sold ad space for years and years and years, and if you say we'll get you 3,000 customers, you go okay. Put in the contract, and then you'll see how many media owners backpedal very, very quickly, and won't do that.
Honestly,
so great,
very true.
Great advice there from Dan. Great advice there from Jan. One last question for you, Dan. Then, who's your Leeds shout out for?
Oh, I think they've been on the show. I know they've been on the show before actually. So it's the boys at Tread. I remember meeting them a couple of years. I had the pleasure of meeting them a couple of years ago now, and what an exciting proposition, building sustainability into everyday purchases. I think it's fantastic, in terms of that offering. So yeah, I would give a massive, well-deserved shout out to the guys at Tread.earth.
Okay. Yep. And as you mentioned, Pete and Will have been guests on the show. So I'll put a link not only to Tread in the show notes, but I'll also put a link to their episode in the show notes as well. Dan, it's been a fascinating run through your operation. Best of luck with your growth pains and your scaling. Thanks very much.
Cheers. Thanks, Phil. Thanks for having me.
I hope that you enjoyed this episode. Make sure you hit the follow button so every new episode gets sent straight to your phone.